Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out for a publication party for Jeff Abbott. Over here on my left, we have this delicious cake, which we will serve to you after you get your book signed, so it doesn't end up with chocolate all over it, which has happened in the past.
I can tell I'm trusted.
It's not you.
Chocolate.
It's just.
It would be me.
It can be messy, is what I would like to say.
Yeah.
So this is really exciting. And after your difficult year last year, are you glad to be able to be back on the road again?
Well, I'm thrilled that thank y'all for having me back, because it was last year. If you don't know, my house burned down 10 days before Blaine came out. And so I ended up I only did the signings in Texas. I didn't do Poison Pen, which is one of my favorite stores. Y'all very kindly sent a box of books, which I signed. And the stores in Florida, because it was just, to lose your house is a shell shock. And
but nobody was hurt. Right?
Nobody was hurt. There was a lightning bolt hit our home about 4 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. My wife and I were downstairs. My wife had just put in a $36 tenderloin into the oven, which we know how much it cost because in the rubble she found the receipt and she filed a claim on it with insurance because it's a $36 tenderloin. My two teenage sons and our cousin were upstairs when it hit. The bolt went through the roof, set it ablaze, through the attic, set it ablaze, into the guest room, which was one room away from where the boys were, and set the bed ablaze.
Wow.
And so the boys put out that fire. We got out of the house, but the attic and the roof were already ablaze. It burned for over 2 hours. It was 6 different fire departments responded. And we basically just stood in the street with about 100 of our neighbors watching the house burn. And then when we, after the fire was out, the fire marshal, whose son had played on a freshman basketball team with our son, took us through the house. There was 10 inches of water in the house. And I was telling Julie, I hadn't really had a cogent thought in my head when all this was going on, and we have flashlights at this point, and we're looking around, and then I see my shelf of Sue Grafton's, and my shelf of James Lee Burke's, and with a Jan Burke or two in there as well, and Harlan Coben, and the books are all destroyed. They're all soaked, right, from the water.
It wasn't the fire, the water.
Right. I wrote an essay about this in Crime Reads. If any of y'all read crime at crimereads.com, they have essays published every day. But it was about how do you deal with losing your lifetime collection of books. And they kind of asked me what I think about writing that, and I said, well, we all got out, and that's what matters. But it is still a shock to me that books. I lost that those books are gone. I lost the first hardback I ever bought with my own money, which was The Stand by Stephen King. I think I was 13, and I saved up my money. It was $12.95 for a hardback then, and made my mother take me to the mall. It was like most kids want to go to the mall to get the cool sneakers or the T-shirt. I wanted the hardback novel. I wasn't going to wait for the paperback, right?
And $12.95 was a lot of money.
$12.95 was a lot of money back in the 70s. So yeah, and and I lost a lot of books I'd collected. We had books on the second floor that burned, and I would find fragments of the pages would drift down when we were going back through the rubble, because most of the walls in the house were still up, but it collapsed inside, and we would find these. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I used that book to research fear, or to research collision or something. And so, it was weird. And so if you have a book collection, go read this crimereads.com essay, because I talk about what you should do to prepare yourself if you should lose this to flood or fire or other mishap. What you need to know before you're dealing with the insurance company and stuff like that, because I learned a lot.
One of the things I can tell you, because our daughter and son-in-law were on their honeymoon when a plumber who had installed a new thing in their laundry room had misinstalled it and their house flooded. If you are not on the insurance policy of the homeowner, the insurance company won't let you in. So we could have actually salvaged quite a lot of their stuff, but we were not allowed in the houses because we were not permitted on their policy. So the first thing we did was add the kids to our homeowner's policy.
Yeah.
So if while we're off somewhere something happens, they can go in the house. And the truth is that the water is just as damaging as the fire, and in fact for books it's even deadlier.
Yeah, the water, the fire, the smoke, just the physical damage that I had a Lindsay Fay book that was crushed by it was on my bedside table.
Yeah.
I was about to start reading her Art of Detection book, and it was crushed by falling debris.
Wow. So did you guys have a lightning rod? How did it happen that
We did not have a lightning rod.
Do most homes have a lightning rod?
No, our new home has a lightning rod. We're moving into our new house on Saturday.
That's very
So,
exciting.
yay.
Yay. Well, it did make me think, that a lightning rod would be a really good thing.
And it's weird. We're not the highest house on the hill, so to speak.
That doesn't matter.
It didn't matter. But now we have a lightning. I call it the lightning deflection system because I heard them say it would act like a deflector shield, like on Star Trek or something.
Okay.
But they call it a lightning protection system. We have 6 lightning rods ranged along the roof, and if lightning strikes any of them, it will disperse the charge throughout, the system and ground it. So that was something we decided to spend some of the insurance money on, just because we had 5 homes in the Austin area struck and burned to the ground that one summer. I think we were the second one.
Right. Well, there were a lot of thunderstorms, and we have them too. So it has occurred to me because we need to do some work on our house that maybe I should talk about lightning. Lightning rods. We had an air conditioner. We're going to talk about the book. I promise. This last thing. But,
and joining us next is Flo from Progressive. Yeah.
Right. But here's what I learned, just as a little tip for any of you watching it. You're required in Scottsdale to have an automatic sprinkler system. And there is a water intake in your house and pipes in your attic. And the fire department actually will come if you ask them and inspect it and run the water through it. I didn't know any of this. So we had a new air conditioning and heating system installed, and the big units are in the attic. Mm-hmm. So one of the installers cut into the line. So I was standing in my living room, and all of a sudden I'm watching this filthy water raining down the walls and flooding the house. Mm-hmm. And mercifully, the library and the books were off to one side, but we had art and other stuff that got in the way. And it's a huge pain to clean it up because of the mold requirements and everything. So I made a note to myself the other day to have the fire department, which I gather is a free service, come out, and it would have been better if the water had been clean. And I guess they will, actually inspect that. But now that homes have to have automatic sprinkler systems, you can actually trigger that off, not even with a fire, and wind up with more damage.
I would do that by cooking something, probably. I'm famous for burning stuff. So.
But so far you haven't put this into a book, because the 3 Beths, I knew we'd get to the book here. And congratulations, because this is publication day for the 3 Beths.
It is publication day. This is the first event. So I'm so thrilled to be here.
But it doesn't appear to revolve around that kind of domestic catastrophe.
No. I don't think, and a lot of people ask, when will you write about it?
Yeah.
I will write about it when my family is ready for me to write about it. My sons are not ready for me to write about it right now.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Because this happened 3 weeks before my oldest son was leaving to go to college, and he goes to Rice in Houston, and 2 weeks after he got to Rice, Harvey hit, and he was trapped in that for over a week. And our younger son, this is the only house he remembers. He's lived in it since he was 2. They're just not ready for me to write about it yet.
There's probably some form of PTSD involved here, isn't it?
I think it's likely. But I think once we're kind of back in the house, I think that will be a big step for them to process it. I have definitely had thoughts about how I might write about it.
Okay.
in a novel. I've written down a lot because that's how I deal with it and I
Sure,
process
writer.
it. It's not how they do. So, but I have to respect that. I mean, the crime reads essay was the first time I'd really written about the fire, and my wife read it and she cried.
Mm.
And and it's like, well, this is hard. It is hard. So, I really want to do a book about it, but I don't want to upset them. So, it's not the same as writing something that annoys a relative that you don't mind them being annoyed. It's a little different. But we'll see where it goes.
I'm sure it's a form of therapy for writers, to create something out of terrible things that happen.
And I think my sons understand that because, it'd be a little bit like they hear people ask me, but they think, oh, that's just the default question. If something else bad had happened, you'd get asked about it. I'm like, yeah, I would be, but that is because people expect writers to sort of try to make sense of that, in a story. So
we had a conversation with Jeff Parker when he was here this summer, and he said he hoped he lived long enough to write about our current political situation, as a way of sort of dealing with it. And maybe it's kind of a mission, for writers to try to help us all make sense of things that are going on in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, because people say things to you after a fire that show that they don't know what to say a lot of the time. It's always safe to say, I'm sorry. That's fine. You don't have to go into other things. We had someone tell us, well, if y'all had been more religious, the house wouldn't have burned down. I'm like, physics? Yeah, I don't think that had anything to do with it, But, people have their own takes about things, and I think a writer can help make sense of all of that. But, and hopefully in a way that's sort of, easier to process than the actual sort of awfulness of the moment. So
it's a really interesting point. I wonder if people are less comfortable with the randomness of the universe, with the thought that you need to be punished for something bad that you have done.
I'm sure people think, well, I'm glad that didn't happen to me, and I'm like, well, I'm also glad it didn't happen to you. I don't want anyone to have to go through this. I wish it hadn't happened to us, but it did. And we'll get through it. I mean, because you kind of, you will get through it. We have. I think in some ways it's made us stronger as a family. In other ways, it, kind of showed me where I think I was sort of falling short, towards my family. I mean, people were just so kind to me, and I was like, would I have been that kind? Am I as good a person? I wondered about that, a couple of times. Because people were just really, really generous. Because it's easy, there's so many things for people vying for our attention, and it's easy to say, okay, well, I don't have to help that person, I'll help the next person, and it's easy to shrug it off. And I was like, I need to be better about helping folks. It just made me aware of it.
A wake-up call. But I'm thinking about applying it to the Three Beths. Now,
okay,
I have
let's
to
talk about
say
the book.
that I really enjoyed the book calendar in the Republic Sunday, which called it the Tree Beths.
The Tree Beths.
Just a little typo there. And I thought that would be a whole different book, right? The Three Beths is opposed
Three
to...
women. The Beths are in a tree. What will happen next?
Well, it could be some sort of, fantasy or speculative fiction
Who
or
knows?
something. But do you remember Carl Hyacin wrote that hilarious book? Not Carl Hyacin, sorry, Dave Barry. His first actual thriller, and it was about the little guy in Florida that lived in a tree, and he made his money by being paid to vote.
Okay.
I've always loved that book. I can't even remember the name of it at the moment, but that was the deal. He lived in a tree and picked up money from people paying him to go to the polls, right?
Well,
But the Three Beths has a series of things that happen that one could say were random, or one could say were brought on by misdeeds, or...
Well, I think the fire definitely affected the writing of the book, because I was almost done with a draft of it, and then the fire happened, and I did get my laptop out, because that was one of the first things people asked was, did you lose any words? Did you lose the manuscript? And I had written...
Surely you were backing it up to the cloud.
I was. I had written 3,000 words that morning that weren't backed up yet, but the laptop got out when we got out, so it was fine. But I finished writing the book, and everyone was like, wow, I can't believe you did this during the fire. And then I read what I'd written, and I was like, well, I can believe I did this during the fire because this is a mess. It wasn't my best work, and I don't think that I was probably in the state of mind right then to do my best work. But it was one of those things I thought, well, the fire pared away a certain number of things in my life, and I have to pare away a certain number of things in this book to make it work. And I don't think I'd ever quite gone. I'm a big believer in rewriting and getting it until it's right. But here it was like I sort of had to take a fire to the book to burn away all the things that weren't working in it. And I think the book emerged a lot stronger for that. And, it's kind of a weird thing. A lot of writers won't say, well, the first draft of this was awful, because like, what an ad for please read the book. But yeah, it was just one of those things. I think after going through that initial shock, and I was like, well, okay, everyone was applauding me for getting the book done. And I was like, oh, but, then it was like, no, the book's not that great. But it is about a family dealing with extraordinary pressure. And the quick summation for that is that someone asked, I've been asked where did I get the idea, and I said I always thought about what it would be like for these families where you see that they have a missing member of the family, and another member of the family is presumed guilty, but the police can't prove anything. And so in this case, a woman named Beth has gone missing. Her husband Craig, everyone in their little suburb kind of tends to think he had something to do with it, but nothing was ever proven, and so they're ostracized. They live under this sort of constant threat, and it's just him and his daughter Mariah together, and Mariah is desperate to find, I kept thinking what a horrible situation for someone who loves her mom, was loyal to her mom, and her father, who she also loves and is loyal to, is accused of, having had a hand in this. What would it be like to live in that situation?
And there's nobody.
And there's nobody.
So nobody knows for sure.
Nobody knows
what
for
has happened
sure.
To
Nobody knows for sure. And then then it sort of combined with another thought I had. We were talking back there about social media. I remember a couple of times on Facebook, I would type in a name looking for an old friend, and I'd get back 10 results immediately. I thought, if I ever need to find a bunch of Michelles or a bunch of Jeffs, Facebook is the place to go looking for them. And that kind of stuck in my mind. I thought, what if you ever had a bad intent? And I thought, well, there wouldn't be really a reason for that. But then I thought about, then that idea kind of glommed onto the other one.
What do you mean by bad intent? You mean putting up a fake Beth?
Well, no. If you're like, I hate all women named Beth, so I'm going to make life miserable for every Beth I meet. Something like that, which it's not really enough to build a book around, but that idea, that aspect of that stuck in there, because then when Mariah finds out that 2 other women named Beth have vanished within a certain time frame as her mom, she's like, okay, then she grabs onto that thread because it means her dad didn't do it, right? And so that's the launching point for the book. So, yeah, sometimes the idea doesn't come as just one idea. It's like sort of 2 unrelated ideas that sort of stick together. I thought, what if someone was killing off people who had a name? Serial killers, you will read this stuff about, Ted Bundy, like dark-haired women with their hair parted in the middle. Well, that was most of American womanhood in the 1970s, and, under a certain age.
Even ironed hair,
or
which
ironed
I never
hair.
Quite understood. Women who ironed their hair.
But you don't hear them talking about, obsessions quite like that anymore. But that had just sort of stuck in my head. But I was mostly thinking about Mariah trying to find an alternate reason because it's too terrible to contemplate that her father might have done something to her mother.
So Mariah actually spots her mother, or thinks she does, right?
She sees who she believes is her mother that's the opening scene in a food court that they used to go to. But then the woman runs from her. And this is when she's like, well, was that my mom? My mom wouldn't have run from me. Did I imagine this? Did I put this is some other woman and I've put this reaction on her? She's just at a fraying point. She's really at the end of her rope at that point, and this is sort of when she decides that she's got to find out what really happened. And she has equipped herself with this. She has armed herself. She's bought a laptop with identity tracking. But she didn't know how to use any of this stuff, but she's just equipped herself, like she's going to go, like this is a television show and she's going to go star in it. So she's kind of a mess as a character, but I really love her. I sort of just loved writing her.
How old is she?
She's 20. No, she's 20.
She's older by now.
She's out of college. She's 20.
Okay.
She's 22 or 23.
How old was she when her mom disappeared?
21.
Okay, so
21.
she was older. I was for some reason thinking she was a teenager. But
well, she is not a terribly mature
no,
22 or 23. She's not. It's sort of it's arrested her development. I think a bit.
I liked her dad. I thought he's a decent guy in a tough situation. Maybe.
Yeah.
We're not sure.
We're not sure how decent is he, but that's sort of the fun of doing this is, and one of the things I appreciated in the reviews were like, they'll say Jeff Abbott is like a stage magician. He's doing something over here, and then you figure out what he's actually doing. And you're like, I'm like, yeah, that's when I know I got you. I'm glad. At least I got the reviewer. With a little bit of misdirection, throughout the whole book. It's sort of fun to do that. I think that was probably something that was lacking in that earlier draft that went up in smoke.
Well, this is a very complicated story with an awful lot of characters, and I can imagine that the first draft wouldn't necessarily be completely polished.
Yeah, and it's funny because people will say the story is complicated, and to me it's sort of, obviously I have a slightly different take on it because I wrote it and imagined it out, but to me it's more of a straight through with a lot of turns and curves. But my goal in it is just to keep you turning the pages and to keep you surprised and to try to maybe subvert some expectations that people have when you're doing this kind of book.
So
like
when you're
this.
doing a book like this, you're not necessarily going to get to a clear-cut resolution. It's not necessarily going to be like Agatha Christie where somebody's arrested and carted off to trial in the hangman.
That sometimes you do have those kinds of resolutions. I certainly have had those in my books before. But other times it's because you've got a character who's so caught up in shades of gray, I think, that there's
more than one character.
Pardon?
Or more than one character.
Or more than one character.
When you've got different agendas and several bad actors, then it's difficult to figure out how each one of them is going to get any kind of equal.
Right. They're sort of at degrees of badness. And then you want to find the ultimate badness. That sounds like such a tech. How do you write the books? Well, I figure out the degrees of badness. But that's sort of the fun of doing it. I mean, I will say, because I made it, I don't want to have made the rewrite sound like drudgery. There was a point about halfway through the rewrite where everything just sort of clicked, and I don't want to say ignited, given the context of how the year had been, but that was sort of how it was. It was like the ideas just blossomed, caught fire, whatever metaphor you want to use, and then it was just, I just had my confidence back about it, and everything just sort of raced forward. And those are the moments you hope for in writing. They don't always happen. Sometimes it can be, you can get to, it's funny because you'll have an idea that sort of illuminates or simplifies or does something you really need to do in the book, and you're like, well, it seems obvious now. Why didn't I have this idea a month ago? I'm on a clock here. But my wife is always like, this is the process. You go through this with every book. It's the process.
I'm sure it's your subconscious, working away and doing things. I also think, you talk about this being a straightforward story, which is basically Mariah and her father trying to work out the truth of what has happened to their mother, Beth. But in order to put in all those twists and turns, you've introduced other characters and their various agendas.
Yes.
And those are the ones where I'm saying they don't all play out equally.
Yeah.
And that's realistic when you've got this much going on. It's different than when you're hunting for one serial killer. If you have a book that's propelled by, and that's really a pure kind of thriller where there's a bad actor, and then people are trying to work out who the bad actor is, and then the big question is, will they catch him?
Right. and how will they catch it, and what's going to happen between,
and how many people will die on the way, and all that good stuff.
What's going to happen between Lucas Davenport and the serial killer at the end of the John Sanford book, and he does this great.
He's really going to cross everybody up in April. He has shared his new plot with me, which I will not tell you, but it's a real zinger. Ooh. It's going to do something that I can't remember anybody's actually done before.
Well, good for him.
I'm going to be, and I love that in somebody who has written so many books to all of a sudden, do something entirely new and unexpected.
Maintained a high level of quality doing it.
We have some interesting coffee conversations in Santa Fe when we're together. It's really fun. And then I have to sit on them for months, it's really hard, but I will do it. But my point is that every book is different.
Yes.
Every book has a different structure. Every book has a different motivation. And even if you're writing a series, that's true. In your case, since you tend to write standalones as often, then everybody can die. Everybody's in jeopardy. The resolutions don't have to move into the next novel.
Yeah, that's all true.
Is that one of the reasons you like writing,
well,
standalones?
I like writing standalones. I've had a number of ideas for standalones. But I'm asked every week when I'm going to write another Sam Capra novel. Right. And I enjoy writing the series too. It's sort of like two different choreographies to two different kinds of music, The novel I'm working on right now is also a standalone. But it's also set in Lake Haven, like Blame and the Three Beths are. So I'm not trying to turn that into a series.
You're doing a Linwood Berkeley with Promise Falls.
I don't have to invent a new suburb of Austin every time. I'm lazy, so and it's sort of fun because people in the suburbs in Austin are all like looking for people that they know or locales that they know in the books. So.
How big is Lake Haven?
Lake Haven is in Austin there's a Westlake Hills which is about 3,000 people, but the school district is bigger than that, and people move there for the school district. And then there's Lakeway, which is near it, which has about 15,000 people. So 10 to 15,000 people. So they're kind of widely different. Lake Haven is a little bit more like Westlake Hills. So it's not huge, but people work in Austin. It's right up against Austin. It's not. It's just a.
My only question was: is it big enough to credibly have these things going
on? No, it's not. But that's not stopping me.
Okay. So it's not really Cabot's Cove, but it's not Chicago.
It's not really Cabot's Cove, but I think some of the crimes that happen in the Three Beths happen in Austin, not in Lake Haven. There's only one crime that happens in Lake Haven, and the mom, Beth, disappears within the Lake Haven city limits, but the rest of it, it's happening elsewhere in Austin as well. So,
where else have you set your books? Have any of them? It's been a long time because you've written so many. Have you ventured outside of Texas?
Oh yeah, well, all the Sam Capras are set in cities around the world because he owns bars around the world. My British publisher was like, "You pulled off this brilliant scheme that you can go on a trip and research bars in any city in the world, and it's a business trip for you." So, because the First Order I had seen set in Russia, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Right. The Sam books have been globe-trotting, or I've said books. One of the books there was set in San Francisco, which I really enjoyed researching. Only with the last two books have I sort of returned to Texas. When I was writing the Sam ones, none of them were in Texas, and that was kind of a nice break. But I'm enjoying writing these.
I was remembering way back when your very, very early books, which if I remember were paperbacks, you started out with.
Yes,
and were they
all in small town Texas?
That's what I thought. Because I've been reading you forever, and the Sams were actually a breakaway from that.
They were, and even my earlier standalones like Fear and Panic either would start in Austin or end in Austin, even if they were mostly set elsewhere. So,
of course, Austin's a fascinating city. It
is.
It's not typically Texan, and yet it really is Texas. I've always thought it was. I've been there and really enjoyed visiting it.
It's shocking to people we're the 11th largest city in the country now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we can't drink our own water this week because of the flooding. Yes, I've come to Phoenix for your water. Thank you. But
That's what you meant.
yeah.
Okay, I told Jeff that it was a horrible error for him to have mentioned on Twitter that he was coming here for the water because it was almost guaranteed to make it rain, right? I knew it. It was like the kiss of death, but I didn't understand why you did it.
All of Austin's under a boil alert. We have to boil our water right now, and this may be true for a week or longer.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mess there right now. But yeah, this is you know, it'll be a test for the city that has grown and grown and grown and grown, and now facing a challenge like that. So we'll
Does
see how they
Austin
cope.
have the same problems that Houston does, in that it's built over a lot of its natural
No.
floodplain and drainage and all?
No, I mean, we're much hillier. Houston's flat. And built on swamps. We're hilly. We're not built on swamps. So what we're having is runoff from the hills. And we have a large river running through the middle of us, and we have surrounded by lakes. So it's just more of a typical. There's a lot of water there to begin with, and you add some more, and it's trouble. So. But it's you know, I'm kind of surprised more authors haven't started writing about Austin. Sometimes there are a few.
Now that you mention it.
Now that I mention it, but you know, because it is a city that's just sort of, you know, and I've lived there most of my life, so I have a very different perspective on it than a lot of the people who have moved there in more recent years. So.
Is it holding on to its very distinct culture?
Yes, I think a lot of people came there for the culture and embraced the culture. It's you know, this whole keep Austin weird thing that they do. It's fighting to hold on, maybe holding on barely by its fingernails sometimes. But you know, so much of the industry there is about creativity, and so you know, the software industry, the music industry, the film industry. So I think that they have wanted to hold on to having a very distinctive character that is somewhat distinctive from Houston and Dallas and San Antonio, all of which have their own kind of personalities as cities. But I enjoy writing about Austin, and people seem to enjoy reading about it. You know, even overseas, people, and I'll get emails from readers overseas saying, "Oh, Austin, I'm going to come for one of your music festivals."
Well, yeah,
You know,
Austin has a rep. Portland has a rep.
Yeah.
You know, Santa Fe calls itself the city different and has its own personality. You know, so I just didn't realize that Austin had grown to that extent.
It has grown to that extent. It's wild.
Well, it sounds like you have a fertile field to explore.
I do.
Any of you have questions that you would like to ask? Some of you have come from some distance. Yeah.
You mentioned Sam Capra. Are you going to go back to him again? And is he ever going to expand that relationship with the woman that watches his baby?
Me? Oh, Leonie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I do want to write another Sam. It's finding the time to write the Sam, because I think my publisher really is kind of big on the Lake Haven books right now, but I want to find that balance where I can do them both. I think, given after everything he went through in the last book, if I do another Sam book, I'm interested in developing the relationship with his child, who's been a baby or near toddler, so we might take a jump forward in time if I do it, and that would then have to deal with his nanny, who's more than a nanny, in his situation with Mila, who, you know, was his partner in crime, and a lot of the relationships in that book would have to move forward. So when I think about writing the next book, half of it is about, okay, what would be the action thriller, you know, the plot that he would be dealing with, and the rest of it is, how do I sort out all his family relationships now? But you know, I think that's something that people enjoy in the Sam books.
How long has it been since you wrote the last one?
Just 2 years.
Yeah, it hasn't
2 years.
been very long.
It hasn't been very long,
Right.
but I'm trying to figure it out. So
I'm sure he's creeping along back here, but not every
He is.
plot would work for Sam. That's for
true.
sure.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Right. Anybody else? No, you're all just
They want
your
cake.
days from driving
They want
so
cake.
far together, right? They probably would like cake.
They would like cake.
Right. Do you have any questions for your fans?
Any of those I can ask when we're signing books and having cake. But yeah, no, that's I appreciate y'all coming out. with the rain and the World Series and the America's Great Read and all the other competition.
Oh, which reminds me, this is not a spoiler because it's already been announced, but To Kill a Mockingbird indeed won,
Oh.
and Outlander was second,
Oh wow!
which I
That's
think is
fantastic.
just a wonderful
That's
thing for
wonderful.
Diana.
Yeah, that's incredible for
very,
her.
very exciting.
I voted for Lonesome Dove.
You like Lonesome Dove,
That's what I voted for.
right?
Yeah.
Well, there were some very good and interesting choices.
Not so. Yeah.
And I thought it was an interesting, to see what people thought best expressed America. I think it's hard to you should never underestimate the value of the movie with To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, the movie is so iconic. In the same way, I think The Maltese Falcon. Many people think they've read The Maltese Falcon, but in point of fact, they saw the movie. And I'm not sure with Mockingbird how many people, associate. You just sort of see Gregory Peck in your mind and so forth.
Well, I remember in school reading the book and then we saw the movie in school too.
Yeah.
It's a double punch.
It's a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some where both of them are iconic.
Right.
And have
High
that
level of
effect.
familiarity.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff, very
Thank y'all
much.
so much.
Thank you
Thank y'all
for
for
joining
coming.
us on
Thank
Facebook.
you.
We're going to have cake
Thank you,
now,
Jeff.
so.